welcome to Inside Politics on A News. I'm Anastasiya Lavrina. Thousands of Georgians have taken to the streets for the 13th consecutive day of protest, demanding a reversal of the government's decision to suspend European Union accession talks. In late November, the ruling Georgian Dream Party announced it will pause Georgia's EU integration process until 2028, a move that has sparked mass protest as the Georgian public is largely in favor of joining the EU. Opposition groups have accused the government of undermining democratic institutions. Tonight, we will discuss the ongoing process, the political implications for the upcoming presidential elections on December 14, and how this crisis could shape Georgia's future. Joining me now from Georgia is George Mchedlishvili, researcher and lecturer of political sciences. Warm welcome to our program.
Good evening. Happy to be your guest.
Thank you very much for joining our discussion. So, what do you think about the current political climate in Georgia?
Well, thank you again for the invitation. I would say that today Georgia experiences the hardest test of its statehood and its European path. The decision of the Prime Minister came like a bolt from the blue. Yes, one can explain that there could be the case for being not very happy with the European Union, for the European bureaucracy. But on the other hand, the Article 78 that Georgia is committed to the path to European Union, Euro-Atlantic European integration, is enshrined in our constitution. 10 years ago introduced by the same very Georgian Dream Party who today announced, but a few days ago announced that it will postpone the implementation and talks with the European Union. So therefore, for the majority of Georgians, I would say kind of the European integration is like a mainstay of the Georgian statehood. It is something very dear to all Georgians who consider themselves the Europeans. So Georgia is indeed European politically, economically, culturally, you name it, in all possible regard. Therefore, it might be, to a certain extent, a formality, because we know that, like for all the accession talk, that membership is not around the corner, but still not being able to conduct the negotiations, which are sometimes painful, which are sometimes bumpy, but still slowly but surely, incrementally, Georgia has been approaching European Union, European standards, and not having this loading star for basically 4 years is, of course, a significant blow for many Georgians. So I do understand these public protests, and all the more surprising that it occurred after the previous wave of protests related to the election, to the questionable election, pretty much died out, and it seemed that the incumbents retained their power. They were in a position of strength, and all of a sudden they created a major problem, major headache for themselves by this, in my opinion, very unjudicious and unwise decision.
That's very interesting. Previously, in my conversation with some Georgian experts, they all called the protest as peaceful. But what's also interesting, Georgia's new foreign minister, Maka Bochorishvili, in her recent interviews stated, actually, she questioned whether the protest by pro-EU groups in the country can truly be described as peaceful. How do you interpret this statement, and what does it suggest about the Georgian government approach to dealing with opposition?
Well, one has to say that Maka Bochorishvili, for years she worked for the foreign ministry. She was the member of the parliament from the Georgian Dream. Well, I do not question her pro-European, pro-Western credentials until very recently, but now, obviously, as the nominee, as the newly elected, politically appointed foreign minister, she, cannot be totally even-handed. So, despite my personal respect to her, I understand that hardly her claim is credible. Again, myself, I was present, as a citizen of Georgia, on several occasions. Actually, last week, lately, unfortunately, I wasn't able to. But I see that largely, basically, the protests are peaceful. There were several groups of very active young people who were using these fireworks and pyrotechnics to shoot in the parliament, which, of course, it was generally in peaceful means, but of course it could be interpreted as, potentially kind of dangerous device, and it could create the pretext for the riot police actually kind of like to unleash the crackdown. So despite actually the majority, most of the people and most of the time are fairly peaceful, there are like some periodic sparks of tension.
Well, on Tuesday, the State Secretary Service of Georgia issued a warning about a planned criminal plot intended to disrupt the upcoming presidential election scheduled for Saturday. How might it affect voter confidence and the integrity of the electoral process?
Well, pretty much. Well, what we have in 3 days. Okay, this presidential. Well, they are not presidential election. Well, the person was already nominated, and I believe that. And again, he might be a nice person, like in his own right. I mean, Mikhail Kavalashvili, the one who should be elected. But you know, his political credentials are not even questionable. They're pretty much non-existent. So therefore, I believe kind of like that very nomination, it was like a mockery. Okay, for the Georgian electorate, for the Georgians. So again, it's hard to discuss. Well, now it seems that kind of like the two sides, the protesters and the government, kind of like they won't budge an inch. So they are very determined. Well, obviously they got some resources, and therefore, well, all sorts of accusations and allegations are possible. Obviously, I am not like position. I do not possess sufficient knowledge like to say to confirm or deny these allegations, but again, it remains to be seen. So I hope that the process will be peaceful generally, and you know, whatever is the outcome, so this standoff will slightly, slowly but surely fizzle out, and of course we will have a normal political process. But personally, so I believe that this presidential nomination was another, I wouldn't say like mistake, it was the decision which was intended to, I wouldn't say like to irritate, just like to ensure the political loyalty from the person who has no qualifications to be a president.
So do you think it can help somehow to diminish the level of disagreements among the society, Georgian society, or it will lead to a more unstable situation?
Well, we know that like this president will have, well, president now, according to the constitution, has largely ceremonial power, but we also saw that like the Georgian dream has this negative experience with regard to the president, like previous, well, the current president Zurabishvili and the previous president, they came to power on the crest of the significant support from the ruling party, like the Georgian dream. They came because they were associated with the Georgian dream, but once, when in power in about a year or two, they turn again their, I would say, petals, the people kind of who brought them to power and tried to carve out the independent niche. So I believe the personality of the president was chosen on the grounds that he is the person because of his, well, very limited professional capacities, lack of any knowledge on like political affairs. He won't present any challenge, right? Because kind of this personality by itself is, I wouldn't say the controversial, it is simply, so it will undermine the institution of the presidency in Georgia, very unfortunately.
But please correct me if I'm wrong. A new elected president will have to work with the parliament and have to overcome all of those difficulties which were mentioned previously and all of those statements which were said by the people on the street. So do you think that there can be some changes with a new person coming to power in Georgia, and what kind of steps do you expect from the Georgian Dream Party?
Well, again, the president should be the one who bridges the differences, who should be above any political party. But you know, since the person who will most probably become president, because like he was like nominated, it will be largely formality because only Georgian Dream Party and their representatives will be voting. So that person lacks even basic qualifications, in my opinion, and that is the major potential problem. Well, and I do not know how these parliamentary sessions like will be conducted, because so far there is only one political party, well, the Georgian Dream, who, according to the official results, won the election, even though the results are questioned by many. So therefore, there will be no political, at the current state, if everything remains like it is today, there will be like no political, I would say, standoffs, no political discussions, no debates in the parliament. So therefore, the role of the president is, well, really very formal, mere formality, mere ceremonial role.
Do you think for Georgia it's still possible to have a balanced policy approach towards Russia and the West, the European Union? You previously said that for Georgia it's very important to continue negotiations with the European Union, but at the same time, as it was stated by the Prime Minister of the country, there is the border with Russia and there should be any type of negotiations with another part too. So how do you see this approach by the Georgian government in the future?
Well, I want to be optimistic, even though, of course, I'm not sure how my optimism will play out in reality. Well, Russia, so for Georgia, is the country which occupies two provinces. So as an Azerbaijani citizen, you know firsthand what it means, how it feels to have the significant chunk of the territory to be occupied by another country. There are no diplomatic relations between Georgia and Russia now. So if there are some beginning of the negotiation, it should start from the conditions of the restoration of territorial integrity of Georgia. So I know it is like extremely hard task. It is an uphill battle, and therefore we expected for decades this help on the part of our Western partners. But today, very unfortunately, the relationship between the Georgian government, the Georgian leadership, and the West, our Western partners, is extremely tense. Well, not even tense, they are very bad. There is significant bad blood between the two. Some European countries even introduced personal sanctions against certain Georgian officials. The latest resolution of the European Parliament, which was actually kind of the proximate trigger of this the recent decision of this Prime Minister, is also very, very critical. I believe it's not entirely fair. I believe it is wanting. It has several not very wisely drafted entries, but still without being like judgmental, but without actually passing any normative judgment, I can say that it is obvious that the relations are very tense. Relations with the current U.S. administration is very tense. I don't know how the ties with the Trump administration, which is about to be inaugurated on January 20th next year, will continue, but at that point, currently we have extremely bad relations between our major Western partners, which of course aggravate our potential negotiations with Russia and resolving our major problems, which is the restoration of territorial integrity.
Well, with 27 EU member states considering possible sanctions against Georgian officials responsible for violence against pro-EU protesters, Hungary has expressed its intention to block such a proposal. How do you see Hungary's stance impacting the EU's ability to take unified action on this issue?
Hungary will have a significant sway for 3 more weeks because Hungary is holding the EU presidency. On January the 1st, EU presidency will pass to Poland, which is far more critical to the Georgian authorities in the current state of the European Union. And of course, they will have more influence. But certain decisions will be passed only on this consensual, on the basis of consensus. And of course, with Hungary and potentially Slovakia, so this consensus will not be achieved. Of course, certain sanctions, certain steps will be taken, but they will not go as far as the cancellation of the visa-free travel of Georgian citizens to the European Union.
Well, that's another important question I want to ask you. What key factors set Georgia apart from, for example, Moldova and Ukraine in terms of its EU membership prospects? This is the first question which comes to mind of some experts saying that, well, Georgia want to be a member of the European Union, but not only Georgia, there are some other countries who are in a waiting list. And why do you think Georgia should have more opportunities to get this membership?
I would say opportunities. I believe to the contrary, Georgia is held to more stringent standards and regulations and demands on the part of the European Union. One can see certain elements of the double standards. I would go as far as saying that. For instance, Moldova is still the member of the Commonwealth of the Independent States, but still holds the candidacy status. No one demands the secession of the membership in this Commonwealth of Independent States. And therefore, well, one can question the even-handedness and the objectivity of certain European officials, certain people in the European quarters. Well, Ukraine, it is a very special case because currently Ukraine is a target of the massive and brutal Russian aggression. And of course, so in the wartime, the entire calculus, the entire relationship with the European Union and the West is like different. It is about survival of the state. But until very recently, until 2022, when kind of this like current stages of the negotiation with the European Union, which led to granting of the candidacy status to first Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia started, Georgia was even slightly ahead of the other countries in terms of development of the democratic institutions, like the separation of power and many other parameters. So now the relationships are far more tense, and well, I believe there will be political will on the part of the Georgian leadership as well as whoever it will be. And again, we cannot still say actually how the situation will be resolved, and the European officials.
You rightly mentioned previously there is still an ongoing conflict between Russia and Georgia. The issue hasn't been solved yet. Do you think for Georgia is it possible to become a member of the European Union if the issues with Russia is not solved? Doesn't matter we are talking about this year or 2028 or any other option.
Well, the European Union is not NATO. It is possible to, for instance, like Ukraine held the negotiation and was on track. I wouldn't say kind of the eventual membership, but kind of getting the candidate status with Crimea being occupied, with the parts of Donbass being occupied. And I guess the same situation is in Georgia. Yes, formally Georgia will join in its entirety, but of course it will apply to the territory which is controlled by the Georgian government. But Georgia is not NATO, and therefore it doesn't have kind of like such a pronounced security dimension. Therefore it will be easier.
Well, and one more question. A couple of days ago, the UK Foreign Secretary has announced a reduction in support and engagement with the Georgian government. What do you think this shift means for Georgia's international relations? I mean, the United Kingdom and some other European countries decided not to support financially even some different civil society projects in Georgia. Will it affect the stance of Georgian community and the intention of all of those who are now arriving in the streets of Georgia?
Well, it just shows that the relations between European countries, well, be it UK, be it EU, and some prominent members of the European Union are on the downturn. They need to be rectified, so there should be like political will. But currently, it means that like many countries, they try to demonstrate, they behave demonstrably, I would say, in an unfriendly way towards Georgia, like Sweden, downgrading its diplomatic presence in our country. Canada also issued a very critical statement. Now, United Kingdom, this joint statement was made by the presidents of France, Poland, and the Chancellor of Germany. We see kind of the array of steps which are intended to demonstrate the dissatisfaction with the behavior of the Georgian leadership. Again, so I guess how correct and how well warranted and how fair are these assessments and our steps? Yeah, I think this is a subject of another like longer conversation. But obviously, we see that there is some broken bridges which need to be restored.
Well, George, thank you. Thank you so much for joining our discussion today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you, dear viewers, for watching Inside Politics. Stay with us and see you in the next edition.